Well, hello and welcome to Bowtie Life, where we talk mostly about gardening and sometimes about life. And today is going to be one of those life days. If you watched any of my videos, you probably know that I have lived with ADHD all my life. What I consider a very difficult case of it, but I want to talk today about my biggest improvement in my life as far as my ADHD and what I have discovered to help me the most in becoming more productive in life. So here we go. Hi, I'm Bowtie Dave. So we're out here sitting in the garden and wanted to first cover one very important point here. First off, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a dietitian. I don't sell or give away health advice. This is my experience and what I have been through in my life and what I have discovered in my life that has helped me the most. And you know, a lot of people suffer with ADHD, and I say suffer intentionally that time. If you've watched my videos, you know that I don't believe that ADHD is something to suffer with. I think it's something to live with and something we can figure out how to live with. But I know people suffer with it a lot, and I personally know people that have suffered with it. But in my younger years, I went through several periods in my life where ADHD controlled a lot of my mental abilities and really hampered me. And I actually spent 26 years on the maximum recommended adult dosage of Ritalin. And I tried some of the other medications and never had a lot of success with anything except for Ritalin. And as a result, my resting heart rate was over 100 for 26 years. And many times that scared me. It kind of surprised me when I would wake up and my heart rate's already 110. And that's one of the things that Ritalin can do for you. It's a little scary. Now, this talk here is so important. I normally kind of do these videos off the cuff and kind of have an idea of what I want to talk about. I actually had to make an outline for this one because it's very important to me because of the huge chunk of my life that has been spent living with ADHD and figuring out how to live with ADHD. Now, I'm going to be talking about something I am taking instead of any medication and anything that causes problems to the body, anything with side effects, anything with negative side effects, I should say. And there's actually two things that I do now that really altered my whole life as far as how I deal with ADHD. And I'm going to talk about the other one in a future video, but this one here is the important one. And so the most important thing that I take for my ADHD that I want to talk about here in this video is niacin. That's another form of vitamin B3. And before we go any further, if you've ever tried niacin before and you've had trouble with it, either making your skin turn red, flushing, or maybe feeling like your body is heating up, stay to the end because I have a recommendation that specifically addresses that. But recently I read an article that kind of inspired me to make this video, and I've been wanting to make this video for a long time. I just didn't quite know how to approach it, and that article really kind of helped me clarify things in my own brain, which if you're suffering with ADHD or you know someone that's suffering with ADHD, most of the time your biggest enemy is your own brain, and that's really where I am and have been for a very, very long time. I'm 57, almost 58 years old, and only in the past 5 years have I changed my description from suffering with ADHD to living with ADHD, and I truly believe everyone can. So I'm recording this from my garden, obviously, and I've discovered that gardening for me has really helped with my focus and my mind, and helped bring my mind to peace. And I've been gardening. This is my 4th year of gardening now. I've been doing some of the stuff I'm going to discuss in these next few videos. And by the way, at the very end of this, there is a link in the outro, the closing sequence, to a playlist that has all these videos that I'm talking specifically about ADHD. And if you're not already watching through that, I would encourage you to look through that and see what else I am doing, and how I am learning to live with ADHD. It is not something that is cured, I don't believe, and but I do believe it is something that can be productive. Now, as far as niacin, I want to talk a few things about niacin, niacinamide, V3. There's various forms of this, and there is a lot of incredible benefits of niacin. One thing that was published recently, and by the way, this article that I was inspired to finally create this video, there's a lot of reference material, and I want to make sure that I get accurate reference material, so bear with me, because in my outline I have references to studies and articles and stuff that I want to be sure to include here, because I don't want this video to come across as just my off-the-cuff information that I think. This is stuff that has been proven. This is stuff that's been done over the past century. Not just, this is not new stuff. A lot of this is not new information. And this is, I think it's very interesting, because we're talking about getting the body to heal itself, getting the body to function properly, naturally, not with things that could have possible side effects and other problems, which that is what I'm trying to avoid, because I think I've spent far too many years in those side effects. So I will be talking about reference materials in the video, and I'm also going to try to include stuff in the description. So if you ever need to go back and look specifically at anything, I'm going to try to get as complete as I can in the description of this video, so that those notes will be in there. Also, this video is split up into chapters. If you want to go to a certain part of this video, you'll notice that you can go to certain points that I'm going to be making over the next several minutes. I hope this doesn't get too long, but I have a feeling it's not going to be short. But the first thing that I thought was really interesting in regards to COVID, recovery, and kidney disease. There was a study published in Kidney 360 back in 2020 of COVID-19 patients suffering from acute kidney injury. They discovered that with a niacin treatment, they had 25% lower death rate, which I thought was interesting. That, you know, that's something we've all been dealing with recently. This is near the end of 2023, and still fresh in all our minds. Another thing, as far as COVID related, this is not a video to be, I'm not making controversial things. I'm not going to talk about controversial things. I'm just trying to get the facts, get clear information of things that have happened. And so I don't want to get off into the COVID debate or anything, but Dr. Mukul Gharote, and if I say that wrong, I am so sorry, but he wrote in April of 2021 that in India they discovered that recovery time from COVID for people who are taking niacin could be reduced as much as 30%. And now this is very interesting, because I had COVID one time, and the one time I had it, I had COVID pretty rough for 36 hours, and then I was done. Now, I take a lot of niacin, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit, and the bugs are flying around my head, but I have a feeling, I never knew this particular point, but I have a feeling that the fact that I take niacin is probably why I recovered so quickly. Another, Dr. Todd Penberthy, he wrote a book along with several, in fact, we're going to talk about several doctors here in the next several minutes, called Niacin, The Real Story. And this book shows that niacin will reverse chronic kidney disease. And I mean, that alone is just mind-blowing to me that something like as simple as niacin can be so beneficial as to reverse a problem that we have in society today that's killing people. So another thing, and this is a little more personal to me as far as diabetes and heart disease. Now, I'm a diabetic, I'm type 2 diabetic, and one of the things that Dr. Penberthy discusses in his book, Niacin, The Real Story, more than 50, and he cites more than 50 years of study that proves niacin helps diabetics increase insulin sensitivity, which means the diabetes is reduced. The effects of diabetes. In fact, in my life, about the time that I was starting my niacin treatments, and niacin is a part of my everyday, but about the time I started my niacin treatment, I noticed that my use of insulin reduced significantly. And anymore, and there's a couple of reasons for this, but anymore, I'm using less than a fifth of the insulin that I was using 6 years ago. And that just alone excites me because that's my personal experience. And I didn't know that until I read this article, but that was about the time that I was doing a regular niacin treatment. Another thing, now I don't have cardiovascular disease, but it's also been proven, and this is what he talks about in the book, is that it reduces cardiovascular disease, which I know a lot of people are suffering with that as well throughout our society, and it gets a little scary sometimes, I know, and so we have to take these things into consideration and you know, really start to try to wrap our minds around this. Now, this next point is I don't have personal experience with alcoholism. I know we have in my family we've had experience with it. But something that Dr. Hoffer, who was a co-author of the same book, he had a close relationship with Bill Wilson, who was the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the two of them together observed that niacin presented a great improvement recovering from the anxiety, fatigue, depression, and other discomforts of alcoholism. And that starts to get into specifically what I'm going to discuss here toward the end, and is how the niacin affects the brain and the function of the brain. Another thing, and in fact, there's a couple of publications. AA, I believe, still puts out the pamphlet called the vitamin B3 therapy, and it was something that Dr. Hoffer helped with Bill Wilson on creating for when it came to the literature for Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's a very important piece of information. It's also in the book that I've talked about, of course. So yeah, alcoholism and anxiety and challenges like that. We start to see a pattern of things that happen with the mind and niacin. Now, niacin has a great benefit over the body in several areas. Another area that a lot of us may be familiar with is leaky gut syndrome, and this is also in the book. But with a treatment of just 100 milligrams of niacin. There was a study in the University of Sao Paulo, Brazil, back in the 2000s that found after a 27-day treatment of only 100 milligrams that a person's gut health is greatly improved. And that's the leaky gut thing. And you know, that leaky gut thing is very important. I've talked about this in some of my other videos, is that if we don't have that biome that lives in our gut and lives throughout our body, we're not healthy. And we need to be more healthy. We can live a healthier life in a more natural way. And if we can keep that biome healthy, then we live a more healthy life and things seem to work better. And a lot of our digestive system depends on that biome that we try to maintain, and sometimes unsuccessfully, especially if we're eating a lot of processed foods. And I say processed foods, I'm not trying to preach against it because, frankly, I know I eat processed foods probably more than I should, though I do try to cut a lot of them out. But because of the benefits with the biome, well, in fact, this is the only side effect that I can find as far in my research when it comes to B3. And I've been really looking into B3 for about 5 years now. But Dr. Hoffer, in the same book we were talking about, he cites one of the biggest side effects is long life and clear-headedness. And I'm going to speak to that in just a little bit, but that's part of what niacin does is it creates long life. In fact, he had a patient, Mrs. I can't remember. She was a Canadian patient, and she lived to be 106 years old. She was the oldest citizen of Saskatchewan, or it was a province in one of the provinces of Canada, and she was just as clear-headed the day she passed away as she was her whole life, and they really attributed it to niacin. And Dr. Hoffer has been a huge proponent for niacin for decades, which is reflected in his book that he co-authored. But anyway, here's another side effect. It will lower your bad cholesterol, your triglicerides, and your lipoproteins, which are the bad things that when you go to the doctor and your doctor scolds you for having high whatever, well, that's the bad stuff. But it also increases your HDL, the good cholesterol. And that right there got me excited. I had a bout with bad cholesterol a couple of years before I started my niacin treatment, and I have had good cholesterol ever since, and I did not know this, but I have a feeling that part of it is because I'm taking my niacin very regularly. Now, there is one more other point that I want to talk to, and as we're getting back into the brain here. There was a epidemic of something called pellagra, and I'll be honest, I'd never heard this term in my life, I don't think, until this recent article that I read came out. But pellagra, it's characterized by dementia, diarrhea, dermatitis, and death. 4 Ds. And dementia, I thought that was interesting. Diarrhea, dermatitis. Okay, that one kind of got my interest, and of course death. But it's a lack of it comes from a lack of niacin in the system. And in the 1930s and 1940s, the southern United States was ravaged by an epidemic of this, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Pellagra, pellagra. And this is a term used frequently through that book. But anyway, so the government ordered and this was primarily in the southern United States. People were dying. A lot of people were dying and getting sick and having health issues. But the government mandated that niacin be added to flour, and the epidemic was resolved in the 1950s. And so, just another little thing that niacin does. It helps a lot of things in the body. It's a super vitamin, really, that I believe strongly that people need to have. There's also other things in there, and I got into NAD and some of the other things that having niacin in your body, it improves the body function. But I would encourage you to look up that information. Again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a dietitian. This is just things that I've learned over the years, and I've seen change my life completely. But anyway, so a number of years ago, 5 years ago, I was in a class at our church, and it was called the Maker's Health Diet, and some of you might be familiar with that. Our teacher, our teacher Wayne, he is a health nut. I will call him a health nut. I think he could appreciate that. I say it in the most loving way. I've learned a lot from him, and he played a video in there, and I cannot remember the name of the video, and if I can ever find the name of the video, I'm going to see if I can include it or maybe a reference to it. But it was a video that talked about the Gerson Institute and Dr. Max Gerson back in the 1920s, 1930s. And he started his Gerson treatment, and it's Gerson. And basically he is working on treatments that restore the body's incredible ability to heal itself. And yes, I'm looking at my notes here, so I make sure to get these wordings right. But he had a whole therapy on this, and did a lot of study on it throughout his whole life. In fact, it was so impactful that his daughter, Charlotte Gerson, started the Gerson Institute, which started, I believe it started in Mexico. There's also a branch in San Diego, I think. It's gerson.org is the website. But they do a lot of treatments like this. And one of the treatments that they do is specifically for anxiety and some of the other challenges in the mind, in the brain. And they treat it with a lot of niacin. And one point in particular in this video that I saw years ago talks specifically about treating anxiety and getting people completely off anxiety medications with the use of about 12,000 milligrams of niacin a day. And that's a lot. I don't take that much. I've never taken that much. But, well, one of the biggest challenges with ADHD is, and it's really interesting because if you look at a brain scan of people that they're monitoring the blood flow throughout the brain. Someone with a normal brain has this nice normal flow throughout the whole brain. A person with ADHD or ADD, which there's different varieties of this, but a person with ADD, that brain looks more like Swiss cheese with gaps in it, places that the blood is not circulating as well. And when it comes down to times of trying to focus, I can feel it in my brain. It presents itself as a fog in my brain, and I can't think, and I can't even think of the next thing. In fact, you may have seen the video earlier on in this playlist that I mentioned earlier. It's linked at the end of the video, but it's also going to be in the cards up here. But you know, I was looking at so many tasks and I couldn't even think of one. It was a panic situation, and it was just what I've dealt with throughout my years. But anyway, just that fog that comes in, and I call it a fog. There's so many different ways. I know there's the channel. It's like changing channels so fast you really can't get one topic. The other thing, just yesterday, I put something down that I needed real bad, and I spent 20 minutes figuring out where it was. And you know where it was? It was right in front of me. These are the normal things that a person with ADHD goes through. And I have presented a lot of the very textbook symptoms. I actually was diagnosed back in 1993, I think it was, January of 93. And I've been getting treated ever since. But anyway, so as a result of watching that information from the Gerson Institute, I started taking this right here, and this is the niacin that I take. And now before I go any further, I talked about if you've had problems with flushing in your face or feeling heated in the body. I do want to point out one thing. This niacin, I actually get this at Walmart. Is readily available. It's not very expensive. This is Spring Valley. I've actually taken several brands. There's no sponsorship on this particular brand. It's just what I have available. I've taken several different kinds and I've never experienced any difference. I've had the same success with all of them. But you'll notice up at the top here it says flush free. And that's what you want to look for. And to be honest, I've talked to a lot of people over the years about this, some of which talk about the flushing of the face or the heat. When they go for this flush free, it changes everything. It's a slightly different molecule. It does the same things for you, but it should not create the flushing in the face or the heating up around the neck or wherever the heating happens. It's slightly different for different people. But anyway, so this niacin, and I take a 500 milligram pill. I take up to or at least three of these a day. and that's a 1,500 milligrams. And most days, that's what I take. And let me tell you something. My favorite thing about this is no fast heart rate, nothing negative. I have found no negative side effects of taking niacin. And I've had people try to tell me that there were. In fact, one of them was a doctor, and he recanted at a later date. He recanted his objection. But for all the benefits that this gives me, I'm diabetic. As a diabetic, we're always monitoring kidney function. And all these things that in my life, niacin does so much for me. And I believe that niacin can do a lot for other people. Now, I'll be honest, I take this as needed. One of the things I'll do as I'm going through my life, my day, if I have a point where I'm getting a little foggy and I realize it, and that's half the problem there, is realizing, oh, my brain isn't functioning right now because I have ADHD, and I don't recognize that fact sometimes. But if I can realize it, I actually always carry some extra with me no matter where I am, and I'll go take one. If it's a really bad day, I might take 2 of these. And so some days I have taken as much as 3,000, maybe 3,500 in a single day, but that's rare. Most days, I will say 80% of the days, I'm taking 3 of these 1,500 milligrams spread out throughout the day, and I'm ready to go. Now, the other great thing about this is it doesn't affect sleep habits. And that's one of the biggest things that I so appreciate. I get my sleep. I sleep solid. I feel good in the morning when I wake up. I'm ready to go. All I have to deal with is backaches and everything else from getting old. But that's neither here nor there. So anyway, that pretty much covers everything I wanted to mention about niacin. It is very important stuff. Gut health, I know Dr. Zach Bush has a whole lot of stuff about gut health, and we'll talk about that more in another video, I'm hoping. But I do want to make another video about my personal journey, learning to live with ADHD. And this right here has been the biggest thing that I can recommend for anyone, whether it's for yourself or for a family member. Look into trying to get off of those medications, because we're so convinced, and this really comes from the beginning of the whole medical profession in the past century, and we turn to drugs as a first resort, and we really need to turn to drugs as a last resort and figure out, is there natural ways to take care of things? And now, I'm not saying I'm completely medication free. I do take insulin, as I've already mentioned. I take metformin for my as diabetic medication. So this is, I'm not preaching against it, but I do think we need to be careful and look for these natural sources for things that we can do. I know potassium is one of the things that I have to do on a regular basis, and I eat 2 or 3 bananas a day, and that's just a natural way to get some of those nutrients, and I think it's very important that we look for those ways. But I do have at least one more, if not 2 or 3 more videos on this subject coming out. If you are just stumbling along finding this channel, please subscribe. We do talk mostly about gardening, and as you've seen in the background, we have a extensive garden, and sometimes it's conversations like this where we talk about life, and it's really my own personal journal. This is a little more than my own personal journal. This is a plea. This is advice. This is my experience. I believe it's some of the most valuable experience in my life. I think even more so than the gardening, especially for those who are struggling with ADHD and struggling with medications. And don't be fooled into thinking that medications with side effects is the only solution. God created us. God created our bodies as tremendous machines to heal themselves and to work a certain way. And sometimes finding that certain way is a challenge that takes decades. For me, 3 decades. And I completely understand it. But if you're just stumbling along, please subscribe to the channel. We're trying to grow our community. If you are subscribed, you're coming back to watch another one. Appreciate you watching this video. That also helps grow the channel. If you thought this was informational, educational, inspirational, or just entertaining to watch some guy talking in the garden, please click the thumbs up on this video and share it on your social media. All these items I'm trying to reference down into the description below. If you have any questions, please, oh please, ask in the comments below. I'm more than happy to answer questions. I've been answering questions about this for many, many, many years, and I know there's a lot of people that are having challenges with ADHD, and if one little tiny piece of information that I've learned can help, I feel like it's all worth it. And so, with all of that being said, I hope this video didn't go too very long. Have a blessed day.